topic that's such taboo. It's a huge taboo to even bring this up. You're not allowed to talk about the motive. This is one of the most heavily studied periods in human history. Was a little taken aback that so many people were talking about this Tucker Carlson interview, because now I guess he's just going to have to keep doing outrage bait or outrage farming. He brings on like the guy who had sex with Obama. He's brought on Cat Turd, but he does bring on a lot of far-right reactionaries and even some white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And this is one of those examples where he does an interview with an individual who had previously been promoted by Glenn Greenwald, and Glenn Greenwald did that thing where he said he was promoting him because it was in the interests of everybody. He had written a very good, letter, an open letter, and he wanted to publish this open letter in a Substack article. So this same quote-unquote historian, apparently, for a long period of time, made an episode with Tucker Carlson where he downplays the Holocaust. He talks about how Hitler was the wrong villain, that Churchill, in fact, was the villain of World War II, and goes on from there. Now, you know, as a leftist, I'm no fan of Winston Churchill, and I think he has a ton of shit you should be able to criticize, a lot of crimes against humanity, and certainly his actions, I believe, towards the widespread famine, the Bengal famine, towards Indians, constitutes intent to certainly eliminate a group of people that he despised, which happened to be poor Indians and Indian farmers specifically. Winston Churchill is a monster. He is a monster who deserves to be known as a monster, and just the fact that a lot of the Western, allies and their leaders of World War II simply won in the history books across the board and are so venerated doesn't really give you the opportunity to examine a lot of the horrors and the atrocities they committed. Winston Churchill sucks, absolutely. That doesn't make Hitler good. That's not like, and so I mean we should look at now Hitler. It's like no, Hitler's a horrifying monster too. The Holocaust is real. He definitely did target millions and millions of Jews for extermination and other groups as well. He should be vilified. He should have been destroyed. He should have been defeated. It's a good thing, actually, that fascism was destroyed and defeated. And anything to the contrary, doing this history revisionism, is kind of being done by modern day, like white supremacists and neo-Nazis, essentially. Yeah, two things can be true at the same time. Winston Churchill can be a monster, and everything Hitler did was still really bad. But anyways, this led, Elon to saying, very interesting, worth watching. History of the Israel-Palestine conflict, Jonestown cult, World War II, blah, blah, blah. So I guess let's click to one of the more interesting parts.
But how would you assess Winston Churchill?
I got in trouble with my podcast partner, Jocko Willink, one time because
Jocko
he's
Bean?
a New England Dutchman who's his family. It's near and dear to they're Dutch, but very near and dear to their heart that Winston Churchill is a hero, right?
Well, everyone
thinks that. He really thinks that. And I told him that I think, and maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe, but I told him, maybe trying to provoke him a little bit, that I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities, but I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland. Or just, at every step of the way, like people are very often, I find, surprised to learn. There's a two-step process.
Well,
right?
why don't you just make the case for that?
Yeah, no, let's get into this. This sounds great. So are you saying that like Hitler would have stopped after Poland had it not been for Winston Churchill, and Winston Churchill was just let's do this, you Nazi, and then the whole war broke out? Is that effectively what happened?
Okay, so you've made your statement. A lot of people are thinking, well, wait a second. You just said Churchill, my childhood hero, the guy with the cigar.
Yeah. Well, and the next thought that comes into their head is that, oh, you're saying Churchill was the chief villain, therefore his enemies, Adolf Hitler and so forth, were
Stalin,
the protagonists, right?
Yeah.
That they're the good guys if you think he's a villain. That's not the case.
And by the way, to like the Candace Owens history revisionist when it comes to Hitler, by the way, before Hitler's expansionism and imperialism and trying to conquest a lot of parts of Europe and then eventually the USSR, life was already horrifying for Jewish people within the country, for LGBTQ plus people within the country, for Roma people within the country, for disabled people within the country. Like at that point, fascism had already been targeting for them for some time. I hear often that, like, you know, Hitler, his real problem was that he wasn't a nationalist, you know, is what Candace Owens said, and that he actually wanted to expand beyond his borders. But if he had just stayed in Germany, everything would have been totally fine. It's like, well, yeah, if you were part of the pure Aryan white race, you may have been okay, as long as your blood quantum was good enough. There wasn't like some family history that they can track down and find about you. But wait, what are we doing here? What's going on?
That's not what I'm saying. You know, Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You know,
so this is Holocaust revisionism, to be like, oh, well, the reason why the death camps, the whole thing, the systematic extermination of Jewish people happened, but it's because they were underprepared. Like, eventually they were just so good at what they were doing, blitzkrieging, seizing, control over areas and stuff, conquering France, all that kind of stuff, that, yeah, they hadn't really prepared for the fact that there would be lots and lots of people that they would eventually have to put into internment camps and exterminate, through torturous and horrifying means. That's, so, yeah, I mean, it was just kind of like, you just don't expect these things kind of thing. Like, this is the opposite of someone who had a very, very demonstrable plan to exterminate the Jews. That's not something that we really have to ponder. There's something that there's enough historical evidence, both from, the testimony in the Nuremberg trials, from people who were direct associates with Hitler, to people who were part of the plan itself, to the documents, to the regimented systems and cataloging systems that were developed by companies like IBM in order to actually effectively do something on a scale that the Holocaust was actually done. This is not something that just happens in secret and then it's all, that it was a reflex. He was reflexively just trying to handle all the prisoners of war effectively, and that's what led to the death camps. Yeah, it was an inconvenience, really. So again, profoundly fucked up, and very, very, very strange that this person is even being labeled as historian, let alone one of Tucker Carlson's favorite historians. Scrolling through this dude's Twitter, apparently this is doing numbers for him too. Prophecy. Things will have tipped over when Tucker Carlson looks directly into the camera at his audience and says, "They will call you fascists. Don't listen to them." Turned out to be self-fulfilling. What a prediction, like Nostra Carlson here, who's looking over him, is like, so if you kind of try and do Holocaust revisionism, people might call you a Nazi. And then it's like, hey, people are calling me a Nazi. Whoa, how did he see that coming? That's wild. So wild, he knew. He somehow knew. Hitler faced calls to commence strikes in retaliation for the hunger blockade, but resisted. In January, Churchill publicly wondered why England had not yet been attacked from the air, as that was going to save up for some orgy of frightfulness, which will soon come upon us. He's got a 24th thread here to try and justify and back up, and also promote his own Substack based on his own fucking, neo-Nazi shit. Pretty fucked up, though. Like, if you go here, Tucker Carlson's favorite historian was repeatedly suggesting Hitler wasn't so bad. Daryl Cooper, the historian deemed by Tucker Carlson to be the, quote, best and most honest in the U.S., appears to have a strained fondness for Adolf Hitler. Cooper recently joined Carlson on an episode of the Tucker Carlson Show. During the conversation, Cooper claimed that Winston Churchill was the, quote, chief villain of World War II because he was primarily responsible for the war becoming what it did. He also claimed that the Holocaust was some kind of unintended consequence of Germany being completely underprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war. According to Cooper, millions ended up dead because there was no food to feed them, and German soldiers decided that it was more humane to just finish them off quickly. Based on the social media activity, the whitewashing of the atrocities of the Holocaust isn't out of the ordinary for Cooper. In a now-deleted tweet from late July, he appeared to claim the scenes of Nazi-occupied France, specifically a photo of Hitler before the Eiffel Tower, were, quote, preferable when compared to the scenes of the Olympic opening ceremony in Paris. This is Nazi shit. If you think the degeneracy of a Paris opening ceremony that wasn't a parody of Christianity or Jesus, by the way, as many far-righters were trying to say, if you're saying that is worse than when the Nazis conquered France and everything that came afterwards, if you're saying this is a worse outcome, yeah, you're probably a Nazi. I can see why you deleted this post. It looks really fucking bad. And you can be like, oh, it was a joke. It was a joke. I'm just saying, like, you know, that's how bad it was. The decadence of it all. The month before, he posted a bizarre tweet suggesting that the shooter who tried to assassinate Donald Trump went to hell, but Hitler did not. Yes, Tucker's favorite historian is pretty open about being the Hitler guy. If you're having a bad day, just remember that they're currently wandering around hell for... I can't see what this is. There we go. If you're having a bad day, just remember that the Trump shooter is currently wandering around hell looking for Hitler, while the two guys Kyle Rittenhouse dropped figure out how to break the news to him. In another tweet from June 2023, Cooper responded to someone arguing Hitler and Italian director Benito Mussolini were prime examples, dictator, that centralization of power is never a good idea. Cooper relied several screenshots of Wikipedia entries for civil wars across the world, claiming 1,000 years of tyranny is preferable to a single day of anarchy. Here, but a few examples where centralized power would have been very welcome. As Arab proverb goes, 1,000 years of tyranny is preferable to a single day of anarchy. So, the Lebanese Civil War, Rwanda genocide, First Liberian Civil War. These two humans were responsible for the death of millions. Centralization of power is never a good idea, never. And then, yeah, then he comes in with this shit. So, yeah, he seems like a Nazi. What do you think, Glenn Greenwald? Author of mega viral thread on MAGA voters, Daryl Cooper explains his thinking. Note from Glenn Greenwald. On Friday, a relatively obscure Twitter user with fewer than 7,000 followers posting under the pseudonym Martyr Maid posted one of the most mega viral threads of the year. Over the course of 35 tweets, the writer, a podcast host whose real name is Daryl Cooper, set out to explain the mindset that has led so many Trump supporters to believe the 2020 election was fraudulent and more generally to lose faith and trust in most U.S. constitutions of authority. Numerous journalists, including me, promoted the thread as one of the most insightful analysis yet published explaining the animating convictions underlying the MAGA movement. That night, Fox News host Tucker Carlson devoted a 7-minute segment to doing nothing more than reading Cooper's thread. At the CPAC conference on Sunday, former President Donald Trump explicitly recommended the thread using Cooper's name. In the last 4 days, Cooper's Twitter account has gained more than 70,000 followers. Clearly, this thread resonated strongly with that political faction as a true and important explanation of how many MAGA voters have come to understand the world. This is why Glenn Greenwald is a very dangerous figure, especially, like, you know, burning what little, influence and credentials he has left through his previous work to be able to do effectively propaganda for the far right, usually in the form of downplaying their severity. Of trying to make them seem a lot more temperate, a lot less extreme, to hide their power levels, effectively. That's what he's been really good at doing. Yeah, I mean, he was just doing it at a movie premiere, not Alex Jones's film, but a film about Alex Jones, where he was just effectively acting like PR for him, rather than actually challenging him on any of the horrifying things that he did, that he would eventually lose in civil court pretty badly for, by, like, I would say far more accomplished, not that Glenn Greenwald is a lawyer, but people who are capable of doing investigative work. For our Outside Voices freelance section, we asked Cooper to elaborate on his influential thread with the focus which led him to these observations about prevailing MAGA sentiments and why he believes they're important for people to understand. As Cooper notes, he does not share all of the perceptions and beliefs he's conveying, although he shares many of them. Instead, based on the recognition that most media outlets are incapable of understanding, let alone accurately describing the views of a group of people they view with little more than unmitigated contempt, condescension, and scorn. He believes it is imperative that people understand the actual reality of what is motivating so many Trump voters in their views, perceptions, and beliefs, regardless of whether each particular belief is accurate or not. We also believe that this understanding is vital, which is why we are happy to publish Cooper's essay. It should go on without saying that as of true with all our articles published on the Outside Voice, which we treat as an op-ed page. Our publication of this article does not signify agreement with all of its claims, but only our belief that it is a viewpoint worth airing. Sharing the op-eds of fucking Nazis. Cool stuff, Glenn. Good and or normal. Tucker Carlson is pushing Nazi apologia and Holocaust denial. He addressed the RNC just weeks ago. Goes on to talk about the guest. For those who aren't familiar with who you are, I want people to know who you are. And I want you to be widely recognized as the most important historian in the United States, because I think you are. On his Fox show in 2021, Carlson praised Cooper for being really smart, and that's where he read the thread that obviously, Glenn Greenwald was bringing up. They bring up some of the other stuff. Talking about World War II, they threw people into camps and millions of people ended up dead there. The one rule is that you shall not do that. You shall not look at this topic and try to understand how the Germans saw the world, like how the whole thing from the First World War up until the very end of the war, how these people might have genuinely felt like they were the ones under attack. This is what every Nazi or neo-Nazi or white supremacist or neo-reactionary or far-right scumbag on the internet tries to use as an entry point to start pushing their shit, is that this is a topic that's such taboo. it's a huge taboo to even bring this up. You're not allowed to talk about the motive. This is one of the most heavily studied periods in human history. The curiosity surrounding the motivation behind what caused the Holocaust is deeply, deeply something that has fixated human beings, and they have studied the fuck out of it. And it's very well documented what Hitler did, why he did it, and his deep and profound hatred of Jewish people. And they were used to scapegoat so many problems that were initially happening to the German economy prior to the rise of the Germans, of the Nazis within Germany. Like, this is not a, like, it's the thing and you're not allowed to talk about. There's so many history books on the subject. There's so many interviews. There's such a profound and in-depth understanding of a lot of the motivations behind World War II. It's not a like, oh, you're right. People never tell you what was the actual motivation behind World War II. But no one knows. There's not really a lot of books on the subject. Documentaries, anything, you know? Yeah, hot take, Hitler was an anti-Semite. A raging anti-Semite. You might say one of the biggest anti-Semites in all history. And so they go off about that. Why Churchill wanted a war and wanted to fight Germany. Blah, blah, blah. An acceptable solution to the Jewish problem. Daryl, am I right to take the following two inferences from your statements? I'll state them worst case. Number one, death camp extermination arose in part out of a German urge to be humane and compassionate. Number two, a poster asked Cooper on Tuesday morning this. Churchill was installed by Jewish financiers because Jewish interests were at stake in Germany. He highlighted two of Cooper's comments to Carlson that led him to ask that question and added, the notion that there was a humanitarian motive to the Holocaust or that Churchill took the World War to serve or were manipulated by Jewish interests seems like high-octane anti-Semitic jet fuel. I'll say. Cooper responded to the poster by stating in part that he wasn't trying to suggest the Nazis were humane, only that evidence that the reports warning Churchill of starvation conditions that would soon lead to mass death among the weakest and most vulnerable were backed up on the ground, and he does not think the evidence, at least that I've seen, justifies thinking Churchill was installed by Zionists. This post in its entirety. I was trying to make a point that even under the most generous interpretation of Germany's actions, they were responsible for what happened to the people they took into custody. If every excuse was true, they were still responsible. If I'd had to be more cogent at that point of the interview, I'd have gotten to my actual point, and that was about Churchill, namely, that he was fully apprised of the fact that the Hunger blockade was created starving conditions across the continent, and that prisoners and Jews would be at the bottom of the list to receive the food that was available, yet he still refused any consideration of the relief, even brokered neutral nations to ensure the food was distributed to non-German civilians only, a provision to which Germany agreed to at one point. The letter from the camp commandant about, like, are you trying to make Churchill directly responsible for the starvation that was, prevalent during the Holocaust in a lot of the decimated parts of Germany? The letter from the camp commander about finishing people off who would starve in the winter, he really does ask in the letter, would it be more humane, is real. But I did not intend it as proof for German intentions, but as evidence of the reports warning Churchill of starvation conditions that would soon lead to mass death amongst the weakest and most vulnerable that were backed up on the ground. You could probably tell, like, it didn't matter if Churchill was distributing all of the food supplies to Germany. That wasn't stopping the Nazis from trying to intentionally starve Jews under the Holocaust. That was the thing they were doing, regardless if food was bountiful, regardless in periods in which they were winning the war, regardless in periods in which they were at their strongest. That was still an effective policy they were doing, whether or not Churchill was sending it. Like, that's just fucking wild. And this is supposed to be the backtrack that he's now later on being like, oh, well, I was just asking questions, and those questions led me to this. There's not evidence that I've seen justifies thinking Churchill was installed by Zionists. He was installed by a vehemently pro-war anti-German faction, some of whom were wealthy British Jews, most of whom were not. Look, I'm not going full anti-Semitic here, but I'm going to say there were wealthy Jews that put him into power, and that's one of the reasons he came to power. It's true that when Churchill was facing bankruptcy for the loss of his family estate in the late 30s, he was bailed out by a wealthy Jewish banker, amongst others, but I'm not aware of any proof that affected his views. He was always a warmonger and had been a Zionist to at least back 1920. The pro-Zionist press in Britain, some of which was controlled by Jews, some not. This guy can't help himself. And it's just like, again, it's pretty fucking... Hitler tried again, going on the radio to broadcast the call for peace directly to the British people. He would give back parts of Poland that were not majority German, and he would work with other powers to reach an acceptable solution to the Jewish problem. He was ignored. An acceptable solution to the Jewish problem. Grossly misleading. The tweet refers to the appeal to reason by Hitler in July 1940. By this time, Hitler had invaded two direct allies of Britain, Poland, and France, broken multiple treaties, and Eisenstein were killing Jews, Poles, and others. People we only talk about privately calls the destruction of the West. I mean, I'll share this article if you want to share how fucking batshit this entire thing is, but like absolutely wild. And again, the fact that like immediately Elon Musk, like interesting, very interesting. Pulled my curiosity. It did.
Hey, if you'd like to unlock secret bonus episodes as well as uncensored content, go to patreon.com/The Serfs. This show is produced by Anna Loves Riley, Arian McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multimondi, Omni, Political Puppy, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demel, Travis McClinton, Trincell, Words Greenwood, with additional support coming from all of these amazing human beings right here.